Hello, welcome back to A Journey to a Mile. Today we're going to go through the process of getting all of this gear laid out so it'll fit inside of this Pelican Vault case. We want to make sure that everything has enough room so that this can be transported securely and safely as we go about our business. Stay tuned, we'll go through the entire process here in just a moment. All right, so before we lay out anything, I want to talk a little bit about the case itself. So there's 3 layers of foam inside of the case. The bottom layer is a very thin layer. You would not want to be doing any cutting into that layer at all. So make sure that you keep that in mind as you're going. But there are 3 different layers. So if there's something that's a little thicker and you need to cut through into the second layer, that's totally fine. Just keep that in mind as you're going. The other things, I'm going to slide this over just a little bit. On this particular case, the shape of the foam is a little bit different in the corners. And so keep that in mind, and that's going to be really important as I talk through one of the processes we're going to follow. The other thing I like to take note of is where the wheels are, if it has any wheels on it. And of course where the handle is, so that if you're carrying it by the handle, you know what's going to be on the top. So those are important. I'll talk about that in just a little bit as we get a little further along so that you kind of understand how I'm going to keep those into consideration. So let's get started with the first piece that we need to get laid out, and the most important piece, which is the rifle itself. So let me grab that and I'll put it up here. All right, so I mentioned that it's really important to know where the wheels are and where the handle is. So as I'm bringing this rifle in, I'm actually going to put my buttstock on the opposite side of where the wheels are. Now that's not where it's going to end up. So let me explain that for you a little bit. So when I'm done marking, I'm going to have some lines on this foam. I don't like to see those lines. And so I'm going to actually turn this foam over. And so when I turn it over, I'm going to flip it the long ways. Because of these cutouts in the corner that I mentioned where it's a little bit different shape, I need to keep those on this end of the case, or this bottom edge of the case. And so as I flip this, it's going to flip this way, and that's going to make my buttstock next to my wheels. I also prefer to have my optics towards the handle so that the weight of the rifle as it's sitting in there is on the bottom edges as much as possible. A lot of different theories on that, but that's just a personal preference that I have. The other nice thing about this when I flip it that particular way is the serial number on this particular rifle is on the other side, so that'll be facing up. So if I've ever taken this through TSA, anything along that lines, they'll be able to easily see that serial number and take care of that. So this is kind of the first placement I like to get in and get this somewhat positioned. I do like to keep a decent amount of foam on all sides of this so that I can have a good secure base and I have enough padding if this gets banged around at all during transportation. So there's our rifle. Let's go ahead and get some of the next items. I like to start with some of the bigger items and see how I can get them placed. And then I will make some adjustments accordingly at the end of there. So let's grab our bipod and get this set up. So on my bipod, I'm going to get this kind of set up towards the front here. Kind of lay out that there and see how it's going to go. I'll get one of my spotting scopes. And let's see if I can kind of get that laid out. That looks pretty good. It's going to end up being a little bit close because I have quite a bit to get in here. I have my range-finding binoculars that will actually fit within this case. Let me just go and put them in here real fast. so that I have a good feel. I can leave that off to the side for now. That one's going to be a little bit tight, but I think I can make that potentially work there. Let's see, I have my sunshade for my scope. I have my Garmin chronograph and the bipod for tripod for that. I have my wind meter, which I think I can get in kind of a slice, something like that. I may be able to get it in here also if I need to. I do have some magazines I'm going to put in. Some of these are a little taller, so I know I'm going to end up cutting into that second foam. I do like to put them towards the top edge, simply because if I have any tall ones like this one, then I'm not hitting it with this case and getting any of the compression that may be coming from the top as it's coming in. So I like to kind of keep those taller things in the front there. And then I still have my bolt. So my bolt can go right in here. And I believe that is everything I'm trying to get in here. So this should be a fairly good layout. I have decent amount. I like to go through and just kind of retweak and make sure that I have enough space between everything, that my foam is going to give me a good protection. And I go through and get this all lined up so that I can mark it appropriately. All right. Besides this here, I'm pretty happy with that. I need this to come up just a little bit more. Try to keep at least an inch of foam in between there and go from there. All right, so now that I have this somewhat laid out, the next process is to come through and actually mark all of this. Sometimes I'll move a few things out of the way so that as I'm marking it, I don't have to worry about trying to move around the others. So I just use a white chalk marker. So this marker will show up really easily on this foam. Make sure it's kind of primed before you start. And be careful not to get it on your equipment, although this will wipe off relatively easy on your gear as well. And I'll trace all this out, and then I'll kind of show you what that looks like after it's all traced. Okay, so now that I have everything traced out, I'll go ahead and take some of this off, and you can see it's hard to tell exactly how much space you have while everything is on there. But if I go ahead and move some of this out of the way, you will start to see how much space I really do have available. And keep in mind that I am always going to cut on the inside edge of all of my lines. I want this to be snug, and it's better to take less material and have to take a little bit more than it is to take too much and try to fit the foam back in. And so you get an idea now of just how much space is really around that rifle. So my next step is going to be, obviously take the rifle out as well, but I'll take this first layer of foam completely out of the case. And then I will take it, and I like to do it outside. I will take it outside and go ahead and do the cutting. So you may ask, well, what are you going to use to actually cut through this foam and get a good clean line? Believe it or not, a good old household electric cutter, electric knife just like this seems to work the best. So this is what I will use to cut through it. I like to kind of start a little bit in the center of one of these, each of the areas, and then work my way to an edge and then get a nice clean cut all the way around it. You can also get it's pretty easy to get in, especially on these larger ones where you can get a nice clean corner as it's there. Don't worry too much if you cut just a little bit past or you cut a little bit too much. As long as in general the structure stays intact, you'll be perfectly fine. So that'll be my next step. I'm going to take this outside. We'll cut it all out. Like I said, then I'm going to flip this over before I load everything, and then we'll go from there. All right, now that everything has been cut out, I went ahead and put all of the gear back into the case, because my next step is really to go through and see what is still too high, what's too tight, that I may need to cut a little bit more out. Again, like as I mentioned earlier, it's better to cut too little than too much. So I have a few areas that it's pinching a little bit, and so we'll get those cut down. And then anything that's a little too high, I need to cut down into that second layer of foam. So I'm going to mark those now. I'm not too worried about it being reversed. As you can see, I have flipped this over. Now my buttstock is towards my wheels. But when I cut that second layer, I'm going to mark on the inside, and I'll cut that out without flipping it. I'm not going to see those markings anyway because they're going to be in between the two foam layers, so not a big deal there. So I'm going to go ahead and do those minor adjustments, get those second layers items cut out, and we'll come back in here when it's all finished up. All right, I now have finished off cutting into that second layer and making any additional adjustments I have to the foam, and I have everything placed back in. One quick note, I do normally like to put my cleaning rod in my case as well, and a lot of times I'll cut that into the bottom layer just so it's not taking too much space. But in this particular case, the rod I have for this rifle is longer than this case, so I don't have it in here, but just something to keep in mind, just so you always kind of keep it together. So my last step here is really just to make sure that I can close the case properly without too much tension being placed. So I'll go ahead and kind of push this down and get a feel. And I'm going to go ahead and latch it real quick and just make sure that every latch works real simply. Excellent. So there you have it. I'm all set now, ready to securely transport this if I'm going to the range or traveling. So really happy with how this turned out. If you like this type of content, please hit that like and subscribe button down below. Look forward to some more videos coming really soon. Thank you very much.